In the winter of 1920, in a cold experimental laboratory on the outskirts of Hamburg, Germany, an Estonian engineer named Herman Plausen tethered a balloon to a copper cable, floated it 300 feet into the gray sky, and ran the wire down into a bank of capacitors on his workbench. He wasn't flying a kite. He was collecting electricity straight out of the open air. No fuel, no fire, no turning wheel. Within 2 years, he had filed a patent claiming a single station could pull kilowatts of usable power from nothing but the atmosphere overhead. The patent was granted. The number is 1,540,998. You can still read it tonight. And then Herman Plausen disappeared from the record almost completely, and the machine he described was never built at scale by anyone, anywhere again. That is not a coincidence. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why a working blueprint for free electricity from the sky was allowed to gather dust for 100 years, and how you can build a small version of it on your own roof this weekend for less than the price of a tank of gas. Because here is the part that should make every homeowner watching this furious. The sky above your house is not empty. Right now, at this exact moment, the column of air between your roof and the clouds is holding a voltage difference of tens of thousands of volts. It has been there your entire life. It is there in winter, it is there at night. It does not need the sun, and it does not care whether your panels are buried in snow. The energy is real, the physics is settled, and the question is not whether it exists. The question is why almost no one is pulling it down. So what is actually going on up there? Why did a man with a granted patent simply vanish? And why, in an age of rolling blackouts and $400 power bills, is the simplest energy source above our heads the one nobody will talk about? To answer that, we have to go back, not thousands of years, because electricity is not ancient, but to the exact moment human beings first reached up and pulled a piece of the sky down to the ground. The first man to prove it could be done was Benjamin Franklin. In June of 1752, in a field outside Philadelphia, Franklin flew a kite into a storm with a metal key tied to the wet string, and he drew a spark down from the clouds into a Leyden jar, the capacitor of his day. We teach this to school children as a charming story about a man and a kite. What we do not teach them is what it actually proved. It proved that the atmosphere is electrically charged, that the charge can be conducted down a wire, and that it can be stored and used on the ground. Franklin himself wrote that the experiment could draw the electrical fire from the sky. He was not being poetic. He was describing a power source, and he was describing something so potent that within a year, it killed a man. In August of 1753, in St. Petersburg, a physicist named Georg Wilhelm Richtmann set up his own version of Franklin's apparatus to measure the charge of an approaching storm. A glowing ball of light, what we now call ball lightning, leapt from his equipment and struck him dead on the spot. Richtmann became the first scientist in history to die studying atmospheric electricity. Think about what that tells you. You do not get killed by a force that isn't there. The energy overhead was real enough and concentrated enough to end a man's life in an instant. The only question that ever mattered was how to take it gently, a trickle at a time, instead of all at once. For the next century and a half, the greatest minds in physics circled this mystery. And then, at the turn of the 20th century, one man decided he was done studying it and was going to start harvesting it. His name was Nikola Tesla. By 1901, Tesla was the most famous inventor alive. He had given the world alternating current, the system that still runs every wall socket in your home. But Tesla had a far larger obsession. He had become convinced that the Earth and its atmosphere together formed a single, gigantic natural capacitor, a storehouse of electrical energy so vast that for any human purpose, it was effectively unlimited. And on November the 5th, 1901, the United States Patent Office granted him patent number 685,957. Its title, Apparatus for the Utilization of Radiant Energy. Read it for yourself, and you will find, in plain legal language, a description of an elevated metal plate raised high into the air, connected through a capacitor and a circuit, accumulating the natural charge of the atmosphere and discharging it to perform useful work. A roof antenna for free electricity, patented in 1901. And Tesla did not stop at paper. On a hill in Shoreham on Long Island, he began building a tower called Wardenclyffe, a structure designed to draw on and broadcast the planet's own natural energy. 2 years earlier, at his Colorado Springs laboratory in 1899, he had already stunned witnesses by lighting lamps that had no wires running to them at all. The single most credible engineer on Earth was telling anyone who would listen that the air was full of usable power and that he had worked out how to take it. And then the money vanished. The tower stood unfinished and abandoned, and in 1917, Wardenclyffe was dynamited to the ground. Tesla died alone in a New York hotel room in 1943, and within hours, agents of the federal government arrived and seized every page of his notes. Hold on to that sequence: the patent, the tower, the demolition, the seized papers, because it is going to matter enormously when we reach the question of why this is not already on your roof. But to understand how close we actually came, you need to meet the man from Hamburg again, because while Tesla was the prophet of atmospheric power, Herman Plausen was the engineer who sat down and drew the wiring diagram. When Plausen floated those balloons over Hamburg in 1920, he was not theorizing, he was measuring. He took the faint but relentless electrical pressure of the upper air, and, instead of letting it bleed harmlessly away, he funneled it through banks of capacitors and what he called transformers, converting that high-voltage trickle into usable working current. In his 1925 patent, and in his treatise, Production of Electric Energy from Atmospheric Electricity, he laid out complete station designs and claimed outputs measured not in milliwatts, but in kilowatts. A single large station, he calculated, could power a workshop. A self-taught engineer, working alone in the wreckage of post-war Germany, published a complete recipe for pulling household power out of the open sky. And the world's response was to look away. Plausen's company folded, his designs were never commercialized, and a century later, you can count on one hand the number of people who have ever built a working Plausen station. Hold on to that number, almost nobody, because it is the thread that runs through this entire story. The knowledge was never lost. It was published, patented, and printed. It was simply abandoned. And abandoned things, it turns out, are abandoned for reasons. So if Franklin proved it, Richmond died for it, Tesla patented it, and Plausen engineered it, the obvious question is whether any of it was real, or whether these brilliant men were chasing a ghost. The answer is that the energy is not only real, modern atmospheric physics has measured it down to the volt. Let me show you exactly what is hanging over your head right now. Here is the first principle, and it has a name: the atmospheric potential gradient. In fair weather, the air near the ground sits at a voltage difference of roughly 100 volts for every single meter you rise. Stand outside on a clear day, and between the top of your head and the soles of your feet, there is a difference of around 200 volts. It is completely invisible. It is utterly silent. And it is there every second of every day, summer and winter, noon and midnight. The reason you do not feel it is that air is a terrible conductor, so almost no current actually flows through your body. But the pressure, the voltage, is unmistakably there, and atmospheric scientists have been mapping it for well over a century. Now here is the second principle, and this is the one that turns a curiosity into a genuine power source: the global atmospheric electrical circuit. Our entire planet behaves like one colossal battery. The surface of the Earth carries a net negative charge. Far above it, the ionosphere carries an enormous positive charge, sitting at roughly 300,000 volts relative to the ground beneath your feet. 300,000 volts, stretched permanently across the sky. And what keeps that planetary battery charged? Thunderstorms. At any given instant, somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 thunderstorms are raging across the surface of the Earth, and each one acts like a pump, shoving charge back up into the system as fast as it leaks down. The British physicist C.T.R. Wilson worked this circuit out in the 1920s, and the field went on to earn a Nobel Prize. This is not fringe theory. This is in the standard geophysics textbooks, taught in universities right now. And the most frustrating part? This is not experimental, and it is not theoretical. This is settled physics that has been understood for a full century. The sky is a charged capacitor, with one terminal driven into the ground, and the other terminal sitting in the ionosphere. And almost nobody on Earth is building anything to tap it. So how does a roof antenna actually pull it down? The mechanism is beautifully simple, and once you see it, you will never look at your roofline the same way again. You raise a conductor, a wire, a metal screen, a flat plate, up into that voltage gradient, as high as you can safely get it. Because the collector sits at a different height than the ground, it sits at a different electrical potential. The moment you connect that elevated conductor to a capacitor and to a grounding rod driven deep into the earth, you have bridged the two terminals of the planetary battery. Charge begins to flow into the capacitor, filling it slowly the way a dripping tap fills a bucket. Then, a one-way valve, a simple rectifying diode, allows that charge to accumulate without leaking straight back out again. Let the bucket fill high enough, and you can release it in a usable pulse to charge a battery or drive a small load. Elevated collector, capacitor, one-way diode, ground rod. That is the entire architecture of Tesla's 1901 patent, drawn in 4 parts. It really is that clean. And if you want the complete, step-by-step build, the exact antenna height, the capacitor values, the right diode to use, and the grounding and lightning protection that you absolutely cannot skip, it is all laid out in the manual. The link is in the description below this video. It is the same document I assembled directly from the original Tesla and Plausin patents, rebuilt around modern parts you can actually buy today, and written so that someone who has never wired a single thing in their life can follow it safely from the first page to the last. You can have the whole thing in your hands tonight, before you go to bed. Now, there is a second door into this room, and this one is not from 1901. It is from your own lifetime, and it is the reason this entire subject is roaring back to life. In 2020, a team of engineers at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, led by Jun Yao, published a paper in the journal Nature describing a device they named the airgen. It generates a continuous electrical current out of nothing but the humidity in ordinary air. A thin film, riddled with pores smaller than 100 nanometers, draws water molecules out of the atmosphere. As those molecules tumble through the microscopic channels, they shed electrical charge and build a steady voltage across the film, around half a volt, continuously, day and night, indoors or out, with no sun and no wind required. And in 2023, the same lab proved it was not a fluke of one exotic material. They called it the generic airgen effect, and they showed that almost any material, if you riddle it with the right tiny holes, can do exactly the same thing. The air around you is not only charged high overhead, it is a power source right down at the level of the molecule. And that sounds almost too good to be true, so let me anchor it in something you can picture. We now have 2 completely different doors into the same room. The high voltage door, Tesla's elevated antenna tapping the potential gradient of the open sky. And the molecular door, the airgen, tapping the moisture in the air around your head. Both are real. Both are documented. Both run without a single solar panel. So the question quietly stops being, is this possible? And becomes something far more uncomfortable. If all of this is genuinely real, where is the hard proof, and why on earth isn't it everywhere? The proof is everywhere, once you know where to look. Start with the most violent demonstration the sky ever offers: lightning. A single bolt carries up to 1 billion volts and 30,000 amperes, and for a few millionths of a second, the channel runs hotter than the surface of the sun. Every thunderstorm is the planet's battery, visibly discharging in front of you. Nobody on Earth disputes that the energy is up there. The only argument was ever about how to take it gently instead of all at once. But the most astonishing proof that environmental electricity can run real machinery came not from a lab, but from a disaster. In September of 1859, the largest geomagnetic storm in recorded history slammed into the Earth, an event we now call the Carrington event. Telegraph systems across Europe and North America went haywire. And here is the detail almost nobody knows. Telegraph operators discovered they could disconnect their batteries entirely and keep sending messages using nothing but the electrical current the storm was inducing in their lines. The wires were carrying free current straight out of the charged environment. Real equipment running real traffic on power pulled from the sky with the batteries switched off. That happened. It is in the historical record. The atmosphere did exactly what Tesla and Plausin said it could do. Then there is Plausin's own bench in Hamburg, where his balloon collectors reportedly drove real loads, enough that he was confident filing industrial patents on the output. There is Tesla at Colorado Springs in 1899, where independent witnesses described banks of lamps glowing with no wires attached, powered, he insisted, by the resonance of the Earth itself. There is the humble Kelvin water dropper, a device built by Lord Kelvin back in 1867 that uses nothing but falling water and the charge already present in its surroundings to throw sparks of several thousand volts. A machine any physics teacher can still build on a bench today that conjures high voltage out of thin air, literally. And then there is the modern laboratory proof. In Yao's experiments at UMass, a film barely thicker than a human hair produced a steady half-volt around the clock. Stack those films in series, and the team showed you can, and the voltage adds up exactly the way batteries do. Every one of these examples is real, documented, and measurable, and in the case of the airgen, peer-reviewed in one of the most respected scientific journals on the planet. And yet, the total number of homes in America drawing meaningful daily power from the atmosphere is, for all practical purposes, 0. Stop and sit with that for a second. Franklin pulled fire from the sky in 1752. Richmond died, proving it was powerful in 1753. Telegraph lines ran on free atmospheric current in 1859. Tesla patented the harvester in 1901. Plausin published the full blueprint in 1925. A Nobel-winning model of the global circuit was confirmed in the 1920s, and in 2020, a Nature paper proved you can run a current off the humidity in your own living room. That is 270 years of evidence, stacked one piece on top of another. And the device is on essentially no one's roof. So why hasn't this been adopted? The honest answer is the single most important part of this entire video, and it comes in two halves, one physical, one systemic, and I am going to give you both completely straight, because this channel does not deal in miracle gadgets, and it never will. The physical half is this. The open sky energy is enormous in voltage, but stubbornly small in current. The fair weather atmosphere offers only a tiny trickle of current across each square meter of collector you put up. The voltage is gigantic, the flow is gentle. That means a single small antenna does not run your air conditioner, it trickle charges. To pull serious power through the high voltage door, you need height, you need surface area, and you need patience, which is precisely why Plausin reached for 300-foot balloons and Tesla built a tower instead of a desktop gadget. Anyone who promises you that a 2-foot whip antenna will run your whole house off-grid by tomorrow morning is selling you a fantasy, and you should turn around and walk away from them. The reservoir overhead is, for all human purposes, unlimited. The rate at which a backyard rig can draw from it is not. Both of those things are true at the same time, and any honest version of this story has to hold both. But here is where the second half comes in, and this is the half they would much rather you never sat down and thought about. We have built an entire system, a grid, a meter bolted to the side of your house, a utility business model, on one single foundational assumption, that you cannot make your own power, and so you must rent theirs forever. Every regulation flows downhill from that one assumption. The National Electrical Code, in Article 810, governs every outdoor antenna, but it was written around radio and television masts and lightning risk, not energy harvesting. So a rooftop collector falls into a regulatory gray zone that the system simply has no category for. There is no utility on Earth with the slightest incentive to help you tap a source they cannot meter and cannot bill you for. You cannot put a turnstile on the sky, and a technology that no one can own, meter, or sell is a technology that no industry will ever spend a single dollar to develop, refine, or advertise. It does not get banned with a law, it gets buried with a shrug. So here is the reframe, and it is the one thing I want you to carry out of this video above everything else. We are told that the grid is the modern, advanced, sophisticated way to power a home, and that pulling energy out of the air is a primitive fantasy for cranks. But look at it again, honestly. The grid is the brute force solution. Burn something in bulk hundreds of miles away, shove it down endless runs of copper, lose nearly a third of it as waste heat along the way, and meter whatever manages to survive the trip. The sky directly above your roof is the sophisticated solution. Silent, fuel-free, permanent, requiring nothing to be burned or shipped or strip-mined, and already fully paid for by the planet itself. The fantasy was never the antenna. The fantasy is the story they sold you, that the only legitimate way to get electricity is to rent it for the rest of your life from a wire. This technology was not set aside because it failed. It was set aside because no one could work out how to charge you for the sky. But the system is never going to hand this to you. So let me show you how to reach up and take a real piece of it for yourself anyway. There are two honest paths, and I'm going to be square with you about exactly what each one delivers, because the whole point of this channel is real numbers, not magic. The first is the classic Tesla-style collector. You raise an insulated antenna wire or a lightweight aluminum screen as high as you can safely get it above your roofline. You run it down to a high-value capacitor through a fast rectifying diode. An inexpensive Schottky or germanium type does the job, and you bond the entire system to a proper grounding rod driven deep into the earth. The total parts cost lands somewhere around $30 to $45. What it realistically delivers is a trickle, enough to slowly charge a small battery bank over time, run a string of LED lighting, keep a phone or an emergency radio alive, and give you a genuine, working, off-grid source that costs nothing to run and does not care in the slightest whether the sun has gone down. It is not your whole house. It is your first truly independent watt. And once you have actually held a charged cell in your hand that you pulled out of empty air, something changes in how you see that meter on your wall. The second path is the airgen approach, humidity harvesting with stacked nanoporous films. This is the newer, gentler technology. Right now, it still lives mostly in the laboratory and in a handful of early kits, but it is moving fast. The patents are public, and it works indoors, in still air, where a high-voltage antenna never can. And now the part you cannot skip, because I would genuinely rather you build nothing at all than build something dangerous. Anything you raise up into the sky can also catch a lightning strike, and atmospheric voltages do not forgive carelessness. Just ask the ghost of Georg Rickman. The single most important component in the entire build is not the antenna. It is the grounding and the lightning arrestor. Done properly, your system is safe, and it actively protects your house. Done carelessly, you have bolted a target to your roof. The manual walks through the grounding, the arrestor, and the safe discharge sequence step by step, with the diagrams, the exact part numbers, the capacitor ratings, and the realistic output figures all in one place, so there is no guesswork. The link is in the description below. Build the safe version, never the fast version. The roof antenna is a 120-year-old answer to a 21st century problem, drawn from a real granted patent, shaped by the very same physics that lit Franklin's Leyden jar and charges every thunderstorm on the planet, and held back not because it doesn't work, but because the sky is the one power source that no company has ever found a way to bolt a meter onto. A lot of what this channel covers sits outside the mainstream, not because it stopped working, but because the conventional system was never designed to let you power yourself for free. If discovering this kind of forgotten, self-reliant knowledge matters to you, then subscribing and sharing is the simplest way to make sure it keeps being found, instead of being dynamited and forgotten all over again. And if you want to see how you can store every single watt you pull down from the sky in a battery that lasts 100 years, uses no lithium at all, and costs about $5 in materials, then that video is up next.